You told me once that it was fun being famous for about 5 minutes.
Well, I've only been really famous in Holland for, say, 6 months or so, just before I left. And it's not pleasant. Because it always happens when beautiful women come on to you when you're with your wife, your child, and your dog. You know, what are you going to do?
Production of A Good Read on Maine PBS is made possible in part by the Davis Family Foundation.
The diner was housed in a ramshackle building, still elegant in its old age, surrounded by a gallery of chiseled, slender posts under a moss and lichen-covered shingled roof.
Hi, I'm Sandy Fippen, your host of A Good Read. Janwillem van der Wetering has now produced over 30 books for adults and children, has had his work translated into 15 languages, and has fans all over the world. So why would a former Dutch policeman, aspiring Buddhist monk, motorcycle gang member, and jazz aficionado want to settle here on the Maine coast where he has lived for the last 25 years? That may be Van der Wetering's greatest tale of them all.
Somehow I got into writing children's books. I don't know how that happened. I'm not particularly good with kids. When they come and see me, I have a box of toys and I let them play with it. I don't know what to do with kids. But I write books for them. And they're always about this character, Hugh Pine, who's a porcupine who lives in the Maine woods. And Hugh is a very clever porcupine. And so all the animals in the woods come to see him, and with all their problems, they always have problems. And he gets very tired of that. He doesn't want to be a guru. And he discovered this island that he can see from the tree where he lives in, and he wants to live there. And his friend in town is called Mr. McTosh, who's a postmaster. And Hugh says, "Mr. McTosh, yes, Hugh, do you see the island there?" Mr. McTosh looked. "Surely, Hugh, I sometimes stop there when I go fishing. Does anyone live there?" Mr. McTosh scratched his whiskers. "No, it's rather small, you know. Just a hill with a pine tree and some bushes below. Nobody out there. Rather a lonely place, I would say." "Mr. McTosh?" "Yes, Hugh. Would you take me there?" "Just for a look?" asked Mr. McTosh. "I'd like to live there." "Live there?" Mr. McTosh asked. "But Hugh, you'd be all alone. There's plenty to eat, but you won't have any company." "That's nice," Hugh said firmly. "Could you take me there now?"
Janwillem, is Maine the answer to your lifelong quest, living here in Maine?
Well, my lifelong quest is for meaning, but for location, yes, it is definitely the place. And every time I'm out of it, I realize it. When you're in it, you're so happy, you're so contented that what more can you possibly want? You can park in front of the bank. You can park in front of the supermarket. The supermarket has everything you've ever thought of. And 5 minutes later, you can be between the islands and not see a soul except seals and dolphins and eagles. And I can see 4 eagles sometimes here, right from my window. I think this is the place. I really don't think I will do much traveling anymore. I'm 70 now. I'll spend my twilight here in a resounding manner.
On the Maine coast?
On the Maine coast.
What did you know about Maine before you moved here 25 years ago?
Nothing. All I knew, Walter Nowick lived here. I knew Walter Nowick in Japan. And years later I ran across him in Amsterdam, and he told me he'd started a Zen place here. And Zen was one of my big interests. This was in the 60s, and I started commuting because I had to go from Amsterdam to New York, Boston, Chicago for business. So I looked at the map and I saw where Maine was, and I figured out a way of flying to Maine on my way home. And I would visit Nowick Center in Surry, Maine for many years. And then when I started selling my books in Amsterdam and doing so well with it. I thought, why live in Europe and pay these taxes if you can pay and live in America and live a reasonable life financially? And buy land. In Holland you can't buy land. There's no land. People say, if you wanted to buy land, just look at you, you know. 16 million people in half the state of Maine, where are you going to buy land? And here with my first royalty check, I bought all this land here. I couldn't believe the price of it. And the locals were saying, what did you pay for it? You're out of your mind. My grandfather used to buy land here for $300. And what did you say you paid? You know? In Holland, it would have been millions.
What was your plan for this place? Did you design the whole
No,
setup?
I just bought it to sell it. I'm a Dutchman, you know.
A trader.
It was cheap, and I thought I'd buy it and I'll sell it again. But then when I saw how beautiful it was and to the water, and I had this friend who wanted to build stuff, and I ran into some salvage material from Bar Harbor. It all came together, you know. It was pure happenstance, and all these buildings suddenly started appearing.
All the buildings have sort of an oriental flavor to them.
Yeah, because my friend was had been in Japan, and he'd taken thousands of photographs of buildings.
And you have the main house, and then you have your writing house,
Yeah.
and then you have another little place down near the water
Yeah.
where you can
I
meditate.
don't know how that happened, but it's like a little village.
It's fun throughout the house and not around your property. It's just fun being here. And all of a sudden something will pop out of the field or out of a tree, out of the woods. You've got this a piece of driftwood with eyeballs or something.
But no, it's too much stuff.
This one I've never been in before.
Jukebox, nudes,
Everything.
and spirits of the wild country.
Plays all jazz.
Oh, it won't play anything else.
Just jazz.
I've tried, but
Right,
it
right.
won't do it.
No pop music.
No,
And no classical music.
no,
No. No.
hiccups.
Well, thank you for showing me that. Before coming to Maine, let's go back now. Let's fill in the history. You were born and raised in Rotterdam
Rotterdam, yeah.
in 1931
Yeah.
and experienced World War II. Grew up in a wealthy family. And what happened? What brought you to this quest? I mean, I know that you've told me that in World War II, the school you went to had a lot of Jewish kids in it.
Well, that wasn't the start of it. You know, I grew up in ideal circumstances. We had a nice house, nice parents. They were married, they were together, brothers and sisters. You know. I was the youngest one. We had German people in the kitchen. They taught me how to sing. You know, I thought German was a beautiful language. We had German friends, business friends, bring presents. So I thought things were just great, you know. And I was told God is in heaven, and He's created all this for fun. So we're having a good time here. So things were okay. But then I began to notice a few things that weren't quite the way they should be. In fact, they were not all the way they should be. I discovered poverty. There were right behind our avenue, the poor quarter started, and the 30s was a crisis, the depression,
Right.
and people were hungry, and there was a big revolt in the street, riots, and the Dutch military police came in with their bearskin hats and their sabers and sticks and actually killed some people. But I was there, you know, with my father. We happened to be walking there on our way to Sunday school, I think. And so I said, what happened? What's wrong with these people? And my father said, they're hungry, they're unemployed. So I thought, you know, this was my first doubt about the great scheme of things being good. You told me once that you had your doubts, and then
Yes.
when you see the mountains on Mount Desert Island, you have
Yes.
at least some comfort. But
That's
I
right.
didn't have any mountains to look at. But what I did have to look at a little later was German bombers. flying very low over the city. And these were Germans, they're supposed to be good people. And they didn't even use their fancy bombers on us. They used these cargo planes, and they had sliding doors, and I could see the air soldiers throwing out bombs, trying to kill me. You know, what the hell had I done?
They destroyed your father's factory, didn't they?
Yeah, everything. You know, you had warehouses with coffee, and they burned. It was a pretty sight to see it burn. It smelled good too. But so there was an exciting side about war too. You know, just to see these planes, and later to see the German tanks coming in the early morning fog, and the soldiers walking there. You know. So it was adventurous, but it wasn't what they told me. You know, it was.
And you grew up Protestant.
Yeah,
right.
Very Calvinistic. And then at school, I went to the best school for kids in Rotterdam, and all the children of the rich Jewish businessmen were there, and they were gradually being deported, and I saw some more gruesome scenes. And I thought, well, maybe it's because we're rich and we're taken to school in Mercedes and Rolls Royces, and there are these poor people, you know. So there's some justice here, and we're being punished for being rich. But they never came for me, and I said, why not? And well, you're not Jewish. What's Jewish? No, I'm 9 years old. What the hell is Jewish? So I'm beginning to have some severe doubts, and I checked out the Bible. I thought, this is not the right book. You know, they've been telling me lies here.
Did you lose close friends, Jewish friends who were?
Oh, all my schoolmates.
All your schoolmates, right?
Yeah,
and they were.
I had private tuition after them. Yeah, I can still see them, you know. But of course they're all 10 years old. I can see their clothes and the.
Did you actually see them taken away out of the school?
Yeah,
out of the
I saw them being marched to the cattle cars, and because I made a point of going to see that. You know, I was very curious. Disgusting, you know? But it's not just the Jews. I mean, this has been going on as long as human beings have been around.
Right, right.
And finally, it set me off on a philosophical search, which was very similar to what you had in America here in the beatnik generation. But I was all on my own. I didn't have a whole group of people backing me up. The Dutch didn't really go for beatnikkery. You know?
So you went to London first, didn't you? Go to school in London?
First I went to Africa to work.
To your uncle's
my father's
mine.
Business there, and he fired me for being obnoxious and not very punctual
this was
about my working hours.
South Africa, was it?
Cape Town. Yeah.
Cape Town, right, that's right.
So I got odd jobs, and I became an intellectual motorcycle gang member. Based on a novel by Dostoevsky called The Young Demons, which has just been published again in a new translation. I must get that.
And then you went to London.
Then I went to London and studied philosophy, because my father had died by then and left me some money. And my professor at the university got irritated by my questioning and doubting, and he said, it seems to me that the only answer for you would be nihilism, and you have already tried that. But you should try to go a little further and look into Buddhism, which is a nihilistic religion. You might like that. And there are teachers. And he suggested I'd go to Japan.
So you found your way to Japan, and you actually had the gall to go up to this elitist Zen Buddhism place.
Yeah, because
knock
that
on
was
the door.
still my old Christian upbringing. You know, if you knock on the door, it'll open. So I thought, if I make the effort, the spirits will be helpful, and they were.
They let you in.
They let me in.
Right, and you worked with this master
for 1.5 years. Yeah, and he was just wonderful. He was almost a fairy tale master. You know, he looked the part, he behaved, he had a great sense of humor. He was completely detached because he was dying of advanced Parkinson's disease, so he was really free of it all.
And that's what Buddhism is about, isn't it?
Yeah, about
becoming free.
Free, yeah.
Did you know much about Buddhism before?
Yeah, I read everything I could find, but books are books. I mean, it gives you some intellectual understanding, but the nice thing about Buddhism is that there is actual practice and actual live teachers that you can be with.
Why did you think that that was a waste of time at the time?
Well, there were monks, and I'm not a monk.
Did you want to be a monk, though?
No,
Oh,
I just wanted some answers. I didn't want to be a monk.
Okay.
So I was really out of place there, and I couldn't see myself as a religious person. It's against my whole being. That was one thing that I began to understand after 2 years. Another thing was that I had a bad drinking habit, and that doesn't combine very well with a Zen training monastery. And they were having some trouble putting up with me. I would walk through paper doors and stuff. I had to fix them again. And I was very much in awe and admiration of the teacher. But he kept asking me the same question and never accepting any of my answers. So that was getting a little old too. I left and I went to Colombia, where I could get a job. An old friend of mine had a business there, and then I went to Peru. I got married there. Then I went to Australia, working for Dutch companies. And then finally I went back to Amsterdam because somebody offered me a very nice job right in the center of Amsterdam. And I liked that. But then the police I got arrested for dodging the draft. And I hadn't dodged the draft. I had paperwork to prove it, but it was
a technicality.
They could still get me if they wanted me. Because I hadn't told them about changing my address. And if Holland had attacked Russia, they wouldn't have been able to find me. So in order to get out of the military, I volunteered for the police at their suggestion as a reserve cop.
A reserve
but
cop.
I had regular uniform, regular training too. But I wasn't paid. It was evenings and weekends, and I did that for 7 years.
So you decided to combine your interest in Buddhism with your police experience, and you invented these two detectives.
Yeah, well, I didn't really decide, People always say, then I decided to do this and that.
It just happened.
Things happen.
Had you written before then? I mean, were you writing all along?
I wrote The Empty Mirror, my first book about a Japanese experience, and that sold very well in America.
Then you wrote a second book here called A Glimpse of Nothingness, which was about your Zen experiences in Maine, right?
Yeah, and I made it appear as if it was just one consecutive period, but it really was about 20 visits that I'd done when I was still commuting. And I put them all together into one.
So is your new book, After Zen, the new book, is that can you say that's a trilogy now?
I wanted to sum up what happened there. Because I'm very grateful to the Zen experience, but I don't want anything more to do with it.
So you don't meditate at all anymore?
No.
Did you ever have a meditation room here, or when you first built the house?
No, not well.
No daily rituals?
I still have a ritual that I made up myself.
Okay. Can you tell us about that?
Well, what do? I burn incense, and I chant a sutra, and I ring bells to give a little structure to the day. And I clap clappers, and then, if at all possible, I go out in my boat and row for a long time and just look at things.
The Maine Massacre, that's when I discovered you. I remember that first book. And where you brought your two detectives to Maine from Amsterdam. And then you worked in the Buddhism also. So we had these hybrid thrillers set in Maine. And since then you've mentioned Maine a lot in a number of other books. How would you describe your two detectives, the two famous detectives?
Well, they're really both projections of myself. One, Grijpstra is the heavy-set, solid, bourgeois, structural guy, But he's probably the most intelligent of them all. And the Gier is a fancy version of myself. I made him taller and wider shoulders, narrower hips, a bigger moustache, better teeth, bigger brown eyes. And he's an athlete, and he's a good shot. And but he doesn't like football. That's the only part where and he never has a steady love affair. He has lots of little love affairs.
Mm-hmm. There's also a third character, the commissaris, that you use.
Well, he is a combination of the Zen master I had of my father, and the chief of detectives I worked under in Amsterdam was a very interesting guy.
How many children's books have you done now? You've done the Hugh Pine series. You had.
I've done 4 Hugh Pines. Only 3 were published here.
And one little owl, it's called.
One little owl, and then I'm writing. I just finished writing a book for my German publisher for an 8-year-old detective.
An 8-year-old?
Yeah, he drives a tractor, a garden tractor.
Now, there have been also other series of novels and books of short stories and experimental books, like the Murder by Remote Control book.
Yeah.
That was cartoons.
Cartoons, and I'm working on a book now where I want to do the drawings with short texts. It's a book about death. And because I went to Mexico where all these death experiences, the Day of the Dead and all, that really turned me on.
You always have several books going, don't you? That's
what
you've told me.
Yeah.
I know in your house, your other house, not this one, your writing house, you have a book going upstairs and one downstairs. I remember you showing me that once. I thought that was interesting.
Yeah. Yeah, I do. Right now I have 4 different projects I'm working on, plus a movie, plus something else.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm just goofing off all the time. I should be working. But I'm just waiting for it to hit me, and then I can work for a week, and I'll work till 4 o'clock in the morning, and it'll just come out.
Movies have been made and television shows from your works. Have you been satisfied with the film versions of your books?
No.
313 verkeerscentrale, kom eens in. 313 hier verkeerscentrale, goedenavond. Code 7 en 0.
Waarom nemen we geen nieuwe wagen? Bezuiniging. 1 per agent is geregeld. Kijk daar eens.
Curve 17, code 12 in de Beethovenstraat.
In Europe, you're very popular. How do you explain that compared to in the United States, where you're more of a cult figure? Can we say that?
No, well, popularity. I was very popular in Holland for a while, and then I got completely forgotten. I'm not even in print there. In Germany, I got forgotten too, and I'm coming back again because I discovered I'm a philosophical crime writer. But it's not really all that big. And in France, I've never been out of print, but I've never really been a big-time writer either. And in America, with the Empty Mirror, I was to catch me out, but then I wasn't in the country. And since then, I've always been in print.
You told me once that it was fun being famous for about 5 minutes.
Well, I've only been really famous in Holland for, say, 6 months or so, just before I left. And it's not pleasant. Because it always happens when beautiful women come on to you when you're with your wife, your child, and your dog. What are you going to do? Or lesbian women come on to you and say you write nasty about women. And you have to defend yourself, Me? Oh, nasty about women? I'm not nasty about women. Well, what do you mean by that, And they're big butcher ladies and they're going to kill you. Or you're in a hurry to catch a tram and somebody stops you and tells you the story of his life. It never gets you when you want it, and it gets you when you don't want it. It's a terrible punishment. On the other hand, it seems pleasing to the ego.
Right, back to the ego again. But your ego is gone? Did you succeed in erasing your ego?
You're kidding.
Visit our website for more information about A Good Read and the writers featured in this series, including a transcript of the interviews, biographies of each of the authors, a complete list of their published works, some tips on how to find those books, what's on their own must-read book list, and more.
Production of A Good Read on Maine PBS is made possible in part by the Davis Family Foundation.
We are not human beings having a spiritual adventure. We are spiritual beings having a human adventure. It was written all over this car. And I thought, this is it. You know, this is wonderful. This is exactly what we are. So who is in the car? God? You know? It was just a middle-aged lady. And I said, where do you find that? She said, I just thought of it. And I wrote it myself.
That's wonderful.